As the night falls and the darkness creeps in, the world around us changes. Shadows seem to grow longer and the silence becomes deafening. But what happens when the silence is broken by the sound of footsteps that don't belong to anyone you know? What happens when you hear a whisper in your ear, but there's no one there? Welcome to our world of horror, where the unknown is the only certainty and fear is the only emotion. Brace yourself, because the journey we're about to take is not for the faint of heart. Lena and Maya were two sisters who lived in a small town surrounded by forests and mountains. They had always been fascinated by the natural beauty of their surroundings and spent most of their time exploring the woods and hills. One day, while on one of their expeditions, they stumbled upon a strange tunnel hidden behind a thick bush. Curiosity got the better of them, and they decided to investigate. The tunnel was long and dark, and it led deep into the woods. The sisters couldn't resist the temptation to explore further, so they grabbed their flashlights and stepped inside. As they walked further, they noticed that the air inside the tunnel was musty and damp. The walls were slick with moisture, and the ground beneath their feet was uneven and slippery. The darkness seemed to swallow them whole, and they couldn't see more than a few feet in front of them. Suddenly, Lena's flashlight flickered and died, plunging them both into complete darkness. Maya gasped, and Lena cursed herself for not bringing spare batteries. But before they could start panicking, they heard a faint noise in the distance. It sounded like someone shuffling through the dirt, and it was getting closer. The sisters froze, not knowing what to do. They didn't want to turn around and run back the way they came, but they didn't know who or what was approaching them in the darkness. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the noise stopped, and silence enveloped them once more. Shaken but still determined, Lena and Maya decided to continue their exploration. They groped their way forward, feeling their way along the rough walls of the tunnel. Finally, they saw a faint light in the distance, and they quickened their pace. As they got closer, the light grew brighter, and they realized that it was coming from an opening up ahead. They emerged into a small clearing, surrounded by dense forest. In the center of the clearing was an old abandoned mine, its entrance choked with vines and overgrown vegetation. Lena and Maya were both taken aback by the sight. They had heard stories about the mine, about the workers who had died there in a tragic accident many years ago. But they had never actually seen it before. The sisters looked at each other, both feeling a mixture of excitement and apprehension. They knew that they had stumbled upon something unusual and potentially dangerous. But their curiosity overrode their fear, and they decided to investigate the mine further. They cautiously made their way towards the entrance, carefully stepping over the thick vines and brambles. As they got closer, they noticed that the entrance was partially blocked by rocks and debris. They had to climb over the rubble to get inside, and the sound of their footsteps echoed eerily through the abandoned mine. Once inside, they saw that the mine was larger than they had expected. The walls were lined with old mining equipment, rusted and covered in cobwebs. The air was thick with dust, and the floor was littered with broken rocks and debris. As they walked further into the mine, they noticed something strange. There were marks on the walls and the ground, as if something had been dragged through the mine recently. Lena and Maya exchanged a worried glance, wondering what kind of creature could have made those marks. Then, suddenly, they heard a noise behind them. They spun around, shining their flashlights into the darkness. They saw nothing but shadows and dust, but they could feel something watching them, something lurking in the darkness. Lena and Maya knew that they had to leave the mine quickly. They turned around and sprinted back towards the entrance, their hearts racing with fear. They stumbled over the rubble, barely avoiding tripping. Lena and Maya returned home from their exploration of the abandoned mine feeling a mixture of excitement and fear. They had discovered something unusual and potentially dangerous, and they couldn't wait to share their adventure with their friends. But as the days passed, Lena and Maya began to feel uneasy. They couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them, something that had followed them out of the mine. They tried to dismiss their fears as irrational, but they couldn't shake the feeling that something was not right. Their fears were confirmed when they received news that their neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, had gone missing. Mrs. Jenkins was an elderly woman who lived alone in a small cottage on the edge of the woods. She was known for her love of nature and her adventurous spirit, often taking long walks in the woods and exploring the surrounding area. When Lena and Maya heard the news, they immediately thought of the tunnel and the abandoned mine. They knew that they had to investigate further, to find out if there was a connection between Mrs. Jenkins' disappearance and their recent discovery. They set out early one morning, armed with their flashlights and a sense of determination. As they walked towards the tunnel, they noticed something strange. The woods were silent, eerily so, as if all the animals had gone into hiding. When they reached the tunnel, they stepped inside and made their way towards the abandoned mine. As they walked, they heard strange noises coming from the walls, as if something was scratching and clawing at the dirt. When they reached the mine, they saw that the entrance was now completely blocked by rocks and debris. They realized that someone had deliberately tried to seal the mine shut, and they wondered why. Undeterred, Lena and Maya climbed over the rubble and made their way inside the mine. They saw the same marks on the walls and the ground as before, but this time they noticed something new. There was a faint smell in the air, a sickly sweet scent that made their stomachs turn. As they explored further, they saw something that made their blood run cold. There, lying in the middle of the mine, was Mrs. Jenkins' backpack. It was torn and shredded, as if someone or something had ripped it apart. Lena and Maya knew that they had to leave the mine immediately. As they turned to go, they heard a noise behind them. They spun around, shining their flashlights into the darkness, and saw a pair of glowing eyes staring back at them. They didn't wait to see what it was. They turned and ran towards the entrance, their hearts pounding with fear. As they stumbled over the rubble, they heard the sound of something chasing them, something that was gaining on them with every passing second. They burst out of the mine and ran towards the tunnel, their feet pounding against the hard ground. They could hear the sound of something snarling and growling behind them, and they knew that they were in grave danger. Just as they were about to reach the tunnel, something grabbed Maya's ankle and pulled her back. Lena screamed and tried to pull her sister free, but it was too late. Maya was dragged back into the darkness, her screams echoing through the woods. Lena knew that she had to do something. She couldn't leave her sister behind. Not like this. She ran back towards the mine, her heart pounding with fear and adrenaline. When she reached the entrance, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Maya was lying on the ground, unconscious and bleeding. And standing over her, snarling and growling, was a creature unlike anything Lena had ever seen before. Lena stood frozen in fear as the creature snarled and growled at her. It was unlike anything she had ever seen before, with razor-sharp claws, glowing red eyes, and a mouth full of jagged teeth. Lena's mind raced as she tried to figure out what to do next. She knew that she had to act fast if she was going to save her sister. She searched her pockets for anything she could use as a weapon and found a small pocket knife. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. With shaking hands, Lena opened the blade and stepped forward, ready to defend herself and her sister. The creature bared its teeth and lunged towards her, but Lena was quick. She dodged out of the way and lunged forward, stabbing the creature in the side with her knife. The creature roared in pain and turned towards her, its eyes glowing with rage. Lena knew that she had to keep moving, keep dodging and stabbing, if she was going to survive. She circled around the creature, looking for an opening, and finally found one when it lunged towards her again. She dodged out of the way and plunged her knife into its chest, just above its heart. The creature let out a final roar and collapsed to the ground, its body convulsing in its death throes. Lena ran over to her sister and pulled her away from the dying beast, checking her for injuries. Maya was badly hurt, with deep scratches and bite marks all over her body. Lena knew that they had to get her to a hospital as soon as possible, but she also knew that they had to find a way out of the woods first. She looked around and saw the tunnel, just a few feet away. She knew that they had to go through it if they were going to get out of the woods alive. She picked up her sister and started to make her way towards the tunnel, hoping that they would make it out alive. As she walked, she heard strange noises coming from the woods around her. She knew that there were more creatures out there, creatures that were just as dangerous as the one they had just fought. She quickened her pace, trying to get to the safety of the tunnel before they were attacked again. Finally, they reached the tunnel and stepped inside. The air was thick and musty, but it was a relief to be out of the open woods. Lena tried to keep her mind focused on getting her sister to safety, but her thoughts kept returning to the creature they had just fought. What was it? Where had it come from? And why had it attacked them? Lena knew that she didn't have the answers, but she also knew that she couldn't let her guard down. They still had a long way to go before they were safe, and they couldn't afford to make any mistakes. As they made their way through the tunnel, Lena's thoughts turned to their discovery of the abandoned mine. She wondered if there was a connection between the mine and the creatures that were attacking them. She knew that they had to find out more to get to the bottom of this mystery, if they were going to stop the creatures and save their town. But first, they had to make it out of the woods alive. Lena tightened her grip on her sister and pressed on, determined to find a way out of the darkness and into the light. Lena and Maya stumbled out of the tunnel, gasping for air. The air outside was cold and crisp, and they were relieved to be out of the damp, musty tunnel. Lena looked around and saw that they were on the edge of a large clearing, surrounded by dense forest on all sides. She checked her sister's injuries and saw that the wounds were still bleeding. She knew that they needed to get medical attention as soon as possible. She looked around for any signs of civilization, but all she could see was trees and darkness. As they walked further into the clearing, Lena saw something in the distance. It was a small, dilapidated building, barely visible in the dim light. She felt a sense of dread as she approached the building, sensing that something was terribly wrong. The building was old and weathered, with rusted metal walls and broken windows. As Lena approached the entrance, she noticed a sign that read "Mine Office." She realized that they had stumbled upon the entrance to the abandoned mine that they had heard about in town. Lena hesitated, unsure if she wanted to enter the building. But she knew that they needed to find help, and there might be someone inside who could assist them. She pushed open the door, and they stepped inside. The air was stale and dusty, and the only light came from a few flickering light bulbs hanging from the ceiling. As they made their way further inside, they heard strange noises echoing from the depths of the mine. Lena's heart pounded in her chest as she tried to figure out what the noises could be. She knew that they had to be careful. They made their way down a long hallway, lined with doors on either side. Lena tried each door, hoping to find something useful, but they were all locked or empty. Finally, they reached the end of the hallway, and Lena found a door that was slightly ajar. She pushed it open and stepped inside, and immediately regretted her decision. The room was filled with strange objects and symbols, all of them seemingly related to dark and forbidden magic. Lena felt a chill run down her spine as she realized that they had stumbled upon something truly sinister. Suddenly, they heard footsteps outside the door. Lena quickly shut it and backed away, trying to stay as quiet as possible. She heard a deep, guttural voice speaking in a language she didn't understand. She knew that they were in danger, and that they had to get out of there as fast as possible. She grabbed her sister's hand and tried to make their way back to the entrance, but they were met with a group of hooded figures blocking their path. Lena realized that they were surrounded, and that there was no way out. The hooded figures closed in around them, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Lena tried to fight back, but she was outnumbered and outmatched. She knew that their only hope was to find a way out of the mine, but the hooded figures seemed to be blocking every exit. Finally, Lena spotted a small opening in the wall, just big enough for them to squeeze through. She pulled her sister towards the opening and pushed her through, then followed behind her. As they crawled through the narrow tunnel, Lena could hear the hooded figures following them, their footsteps echoing through the darkness. She knew that they had to move quickly if they were going to escape. Finally, they emerged on the other side of the tunnel, panting and exhausted. They looked around and realized that they had stumbled upon a hidden underground chamber, filled with strange and mysterious objects. Lena knew that they had to get out of there as soon as possible, before the hooded figures caught up. Lena and Maya stumbled out of the hidden underground chamber, their hearts racing. They were still surrounded by darkness and uncertainty, unsure of what lay ahead. But they knew that they had to keep moving, to find a way out of the mine and away from the hooded figures that pursued them. As they made their way through the dimly lit tunnels, Lena couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. She knew that they were being watched, and that they were not alone in the mine. She wondered if the disappearances in town were somehow connected to the strange and sinister events they were experiencing. Suddenly, they came across a small room filled with old mining equipment and rusted tools. Lena noticed a desk in the corner of the room with a dusty leather journal sitting on top. She approached the desk and picked up the journal, curious about its contents. As she opened the journal, she was surprised to see that it was filled with detailed notes and observations about the mine and its history. The writing was faded and hard to read, but Lena could make out the words Lilith Mine and the Dark One. She read on, her eyes widening in shock and horror. The journal described dark and dangerous practices involving human sacrifice and forbidden rituals. Lena felt sick to her stomach as she realized that they had stumbled upon something truly evil and otherworldly. Maya looked over her shoulder and gasped as she saw the journal's contents. "Lena, we have to get out of here," she said, her voice shaking with fear. Lena nodded, her mind racing. She knew that they had to find a way to escape the mine and get the journal to the authorities. She carefully tucked the journal into her backpack, determined to keep it safe. As they continued to make their way through the mine, Lena's mind was filled with questions. Who was the Dark One? What had happened at the Lilith mine? And how were the disappearances in town connected to the sinister events they had uncovered? The hooded figures were still pursuing them, their footsteps growing louder and more menacing with each passing moment. Lena knew that they had to find a way out of the mine soon, or they would be trapped forever in its depths. Finally, they saw a glimmer of light ahead, and they knew that they had reached the exit. They burst through the doors of the mine, panting and exhausted, but relieved to be out of the darkness. As they emerged into the light, they were met by a group of police officers and concerned townspeople. Lena held up the journal, explaining its significance and the danger that they had faced in the mine. The police officers took the journal and promised to investigate the matter further. Lena and Maya were taken to the hospital, where they received treatment for their injuries and were questioned by the authorities. In the weeks that followed, the truth about the Lilith mine and its dark history was revealed. The mine had been closed down years ago, after a series of unexplained disappearances and suspicious activity. But the hooded figures had continued their dark and dangerous practices in secret, using the mine as a base for their sinister rituals. Lena and Maya were hailed as heroes for their bravery in uncovering the truth and putting an end to the hooded figures' reign of terror. But the experience had left them scarred and haunted, their lives forever changed by the horrors they had witnessed in the depths of the mine. Lena and Maya's lives had been forever changed by their harrowing experience in the Lilith mine. Even after weeks had passed since their escape, they still struggled to come to terms with what they had witnessed and endured. Lena found herself plagued by nightmares, reliving the terror of the mine and the hooded figures that had pursued them. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, even in the safety of her own home. She knew that the journal they had found in the mine had revealed a darkness that she could never fully comprehend. Maya was quieter than usual, withdrawn and lost in thought. She rarely spoke of their experience in the mine, but Lena could tell that she was deeply affected by it. Lena worried about her sister, wondering if she would ever fully recover from the trauma they had both experienced. The town was abuzz with news of the Lilith mine and the dark secrets it had held. People were shocked and horrified by the revelations, and many were struggling to come to terms with the fact that such evil could exist in their quiet, idyllic community. The police had arrested several members of the hooded figures, but there were still many unanswered questions. Lena knew that she had to do something to try and make sense of what had happened and find some closure. She decided to visit the site of the mine to try and confront her fears and gain some understanding of the darkness that had consumed it. Maya was hesitant at first, but eventually agreed to accompany her sister on the journey. As they approached the mine, Lena could feel her heart racing with a mixture of fear and anticipation. She knew that the mine was now sealed off, but she wanted to get as close as possible to the place that had almost claimed their lives. As they reached the entrance to the mine, Lena stopped and took a deep breath. She felt a sense of unease wash over her, but she was determined to see this through. They made their way to the spot where they had first discovered the underground chamber. The area had been cordoned off with caution tape, but Lena could still make out the rough outline of the entrance. She felt a sudden wave of emotion as memories of their ordeal flooded back to her. Maya put a hand on her shoulder, offering silent comfort and support. For a few moments, they stood there in silence, lost in their own thoughts and emotions. Then Lena pulled out the journal from her backpack, the very same one they had found in the mine. She opened it up and began to read the entries again, her eyes scanning over the faded writing. Maya leaned in closer, trying to make out the words on the pages. As they read on, they realized that the journal had been written by someone who had been deeply involved in the dark practices of the Lilith mine. The writer had been a member of the hooded figures, and the journal contained details of their twisted rituals and sacrifices. Lena felt a sense of disgust and horror wash over her as she tried to comprehend the depths of human depravity that the journal described. Maya was equally disturbed, her face pale and drawn. As they closed the journal, Lena felt a sense of closure wash over her. She knew that she would never fully understand the darkness that had consumed the mine, but she had found some answers and a measure of peace. Maya put a hand on her sister's arm, offering a silent message of solidarity and understanding. They turned away from the mine and made their way back to their car, ready to face whatever lay ahead with newfound strength and courage.